Respected chairpersons, my seniors and friends, good afternoon. Mainly, there are so many types of micronutrients, and it has been reported in the literature that in our population, lot of micronutrients have importance. But mainly, I will be talking on calcium, which is during the whole span of life of a lady, it is very important, and we have few data available with us on this aspect, and I would like to share with that. Why I have chosen calcium? Calcium is actually most abundant inorganic element in human body, and 99% is present in bone. Serum calcium is most precisely controlled biological constant essential to all vital organs, and it is responsible for all cell functions. Exchange of calcium across the cell membrane is responsible for many important physiological events. Calcium hemostasis involves maintenance of both albumin bound and free ionic calcium in intracellular and extracellular compartment. And there is a fine-tuned calcium homeostasis mechanism in the body, and parathyroid hormone, bone, 1,25-dioxyvitamin D, absorption through the intestine, and renal excretion or reabsorption and urinary excretion of calcium they are the key players in this mechanism. And if you see the control of calcium homeostasis, it is physical activity, stimulation of the osteoblast, then parathyroid hormone, and calcium release from the bones by osteoclasis, then role of kidneys, reabsorption, and intestinal absorption. These are, again, as I said, are the key players. Calcium concentration in plasma is closely maintained between 8.5 to 11 milligram per deciliter. And this tight regulation of plasma calcium is always mandatory, otherwise it will affect all the vital functions. So whatever is happening in the body, this concentration or these levels, the body tries to maintain that. And to maintain these levels, if we do not get enough calcium from diet, the body will steal it from the bone because it is stored there. So basic concept is this: diet or bone. Hypoglycemia, if occurs, levels falls below the physiological range, then usually it is asymptomatic, but once it becomes less than 5, then only symptoms of hypocalcemia appears. Now we have done a study of 545 healthy pregnant women, and they were all in the mid second trimester, around 18 weeks of gestation. And we have this population who had less than 10 years of education, majority of them. And we found the average is 8.1. For our laboratory, the cutoff was 8.7. So we found that probably 2/3 of the women had hypocalcemia. And because the serum levels are not below less than 5 in any of one of them, so they were asymptomatic. And they belong to low socioeconomic group and were not, we have excluded, or we have taken those women who were not taking any calcium supplementation or any medicinal form. So before we have given them the calcium supplementation in pregnancy, we have recruited them for our study. And we have found some few striking results. One is that the daily calcium intake on an average was around 300 milligram per day. And I can tell you in the beginning that for diet, this dietary calculation we have devised, and we have worked hard on that. First of all, we have devised samples, portion samples of each type of daily routine, like glasses, plates, katori, size of the chapatis, and all those. These models we have prepared so that we can discuss with the women that what all they are consuming, so that we can be very near to the actual amount of what they were consuming. Then we have discussed with them the recipes, how much, what all they are taking, and then we have converted those quantitative data of raw food into cooked food, and then as per the ICMR guideline, we have converted into their constituent like protein, fat, calories, or calcium or iron intake. So we have done a detailed exercise on those dietary calculation, and we have taken 3 days recall method and standard procedure we have followed to calculate the dietary calculation. So in that the serum calcium levels were in the hypoglycemic group, there was not difference between the two groups, they were comparable. Only thing was their serum calcium levels were low. The other important thing was that their obstetric outcome, when we followed them for their obstetric outcome, immediate obstetric outcome for the mother as well as for the newborn was not affected. And because probably normal fetal and neonatal calcium homeostasis is dependent upon an adequate supply of calcium from the maternal sources. And maternal hypocalcemia can stimulate fetal parathyroid tissue, causing bone demineralization from the mother. And that is why probably the immediate effect on the maternal outcome or the fetal outcome was not observed. When we have done the analysis and we could not find any correlation with any of the parameters related to the maternal demographic profile as well as about the calcium intake. That means serum calcium was totally independent, the serum calcium levels were totally independent of all these factors. When we have tried to see the non-pregnant women, and in that we have around 140 healthy non-pregnant women, and again we found the same thing, that probably around 60% of them were hypocalcemic, and their demographic profile was more or less same. Only thing is their calcium intake was a little bit better, but not up to the mark. It was around nearing to the 600, and calorie intake was also on the lower side. And again, none of the subjects had serum level below 5 milligram %, and therefore they were asymptomatic. And from there, probably it was presumed that there is probably faulty dietary habits or vitamin D deficiency, which may be responsible for this hypocalcemia. Then we have done further study, but before that we wanted to see what happens in the pregnancy or lactation. In pregnancy, as a consequence of hemodilution, the total serum calcium concentration fall during normal pregnancy. This is a physiological phenomena, and obviously this homeostatic control mechanism maintains constant blood level of calcium. During pregnancy and lactation, changes are compatible with the uptake and mobilization of calcium by maternal skeleton to meet high requirement of fetal skeleton. And there is a daily accretion rate of around 250 to 300 milligram per day of calcium by fetal skeleton during 3rd trimester. And hormonal changes in pregnancy and lactation ensure a sufficient supply of calcium to the fetus. In pregnancy, very high circulatory concentration of estrogen and progesterone altered the concentration of many substances including calcium in the maternal blood. And study of calcium homeostasis mechanism during pregnancy have shown that there is an increase in both intestinal calcium absorption and urinary calcium excretion during pregnancy. And this increases the rate of bone turnover during pregnancy also. And there is an increased demand for calcium and inorganic phosphate for fetal development during pregnancy. These are the physiological things. So serum calcium may decrease as a result of their utilization for fetal growth. And as I've told, normal fetus accumulates approximately in toto 21 gram of calcium prior to delivery, with 80% of this occurring to the rapidly mineralizing skeletization in the 3rd trimester only. Here the key adaptive change in response to this strain on the maternal calcium metabolism is, one is there is an increased production of maternal 1,25 dioxy vitamin D, and this adaptive mechanism will further increase the intestinal calcium absorption, and as a consequence may result in hypercalciuria, which is a normal physiological phenomena in pregnancy. So in pregnancy, there is increased concentration of parathyroid hormone, which stimulates skeletal calcium reabsorption, and at the same time there is an increased intestinal absorption and consequently high renal calcium excretion. The daily loss of calcium in breast milk has been estimated to be range from the 280 to 400 milligram. and daily losses up to 1000 milligram have been reported, and therefore a temporary demineralization of skeletal seems to be the main mechanism by which lactating women meet calcium demand if their diet is not sufficient. These changes in mineral metabolism that occur during pregnancy and other considerations such as low dietary calcium, vitamin D3 insufficiency, so some women may experience excessive resorption of calcium from bone. With this background, we have further, and because of this demineralization, we may have increased risk of osteoporotic fracture both during reproductive life or later in the postmenopausal life. So further, we have studied and we have tried to analyze the data. Dietary calcium, we have evaluated that it is less, around 300, and when we have correlated this with the literacy level or the socioeconomic level, we found that these calcium intake is related to literacy level as well as the monthly income. So probably again educational level or the socioeconomic status, improvement in the knowledge, improvement in the socioeconomic status probably increases the awareness and improves the diet of the family, and probably better living condition also indirectly influence this dietary pattern of the family. Further, there are studies available in the literature which have said that assessment of dietary intake revealed that daily intake of pregnant subjects comprises of local vegetables and few dairy products, and therefore probably because of these dietary habits there is a need to change dietary pattern, and obviously one can have this by improving the socioeconomic status and the education program. Otherwise, calcium leads to osteoporosis, and we have further, after knowing that in pregnancy and there is a problem with the dietary intake of the calcium in pregnancy or in the non-pregnant state, and there is a problem of hypocalcemia, and dietary intake is related to the educational and the income status, then we have further tried to correlate these parameters, serum calcium, bone mineral density, with the bone mineral density, serum calcium level and dietary intake with the bone mineral density. And when we have analyzed this, we found, and we have this study, in this we have taken 255 women between 20 years to 60 years, 70 years of age. And throughout the reproductive age group, we have tried to see that what is happening with their bone mineral density in relation to their dietary intake. And if you see here, in the younger age group, there are more percentage of young girls or young ladies who have osteopenia, that is bone mineral density at lumbar spine. And as the age increases, the risk of osteoporosis increases. Then on an average, we got around 19 to 20% of osteoporosis around after 50 years of age. But in the younger age group also, the BMD was low, and more so in the osteoporosis. But however, a small percentage have in the range of osteoporosis also. But the conclusion from this is that they have low bone mineral density as early as in the 20 years of age. If we see the bone mineral density across these age group, slowly bone mineral density has decreased. And if we see their dietary pattern, if we see energy, total calories intake, this is around 1600 to 1700 on an average. Dietary protein was more or less in the normal range, 50. This energy is again, it is below the recommended dietary allowances as per our Indian women, with the moderate activity or the with the average BMI, it should be more than 2000. If you see the dietary calcium on an average, again it was around 500 milligram per day. So when we further analyzed the data, we found that daily dietary total energy, protein and calcium intake had significant correlation with bone mineral density of the lumbar spine, and serum calcium levels had positive correlation with bone mineral density of the femoral neck and the femoral ward triangle. Now when we reviewed the literature further, it was again found that age, nutrition, height and weight are significantly associated with bone mineral density at peripheral sites in healthy young girls. And there is a high prevalence of clinical and biochemical hypovitaminosis D, which exists in healthy children in northern India. The observation that children from low socioeconomic backgrounds have significantly higher prevalence of vitamin D deficiency and low bone mineral density suggests that nutrition plays an important role in the causation of hypovitaminosis. And again, it was recently, it has been observed that in India also, there is very high incidence of low concentration of 25-hydroxyvitamin D in healthy population. Low dietary calcium intake, high phytate content of the diet, and limited exposure to the sunlight. These are the important factors which are responsible for high prevalence of vitamin D deficiency. And this could have a deleterious effect on bone mineral homeostasis and peak bone mass achieved. And it subsequently reflects as a low bone mineral density of our population. So low vitamin D concentration may be attributed to inadequate sun exposure, skin pigmentation, poor dietary habits. Then there are other minor factors in the form of pollution, religious sentiments, clothing patterns, and the working habits, or the you can say social restriction on the women staying inside or outside, whether they are exposed to the sunlight or not. On further analysis, if we see that in the post-menopausal group, bone mineral density was significantly lower as compared to the younger age group. This is a well-known fact, and there is a risk of osteoporosis. But when we see their diet also, in the post-menopausal women, again, there is a significant difference between the calorie intake, protein intake, and the calcium intake. As age advances, the dietary intake of all the components decreases uniformly. So probably there is a urgent need to improve the nutritional status and dietary calcium intake so as to improve the bone health of the population. Now, after this, there is some role of calcium in the pathological condition, and there is evidence in the literature that a low prevalence of preeclampsia, hypertension with proteinuria in pregnancy had been reported from Ethiopia, where diet contained high levels of calcium. These observations were supported by other epidemiological and clinical studies and led to the hypothesis that an increase in calcium intake during pregnancy might reduce the incidence of high blood pressure and preeclampsia among women with low calcium intake. And what is the mechanism of working of calcium supplementation? Probably it reduces the parathyroid release and intracellular calcium, and thereby reduces smooth muscle contraction and therefore promotes vasodilation, thereby prevents preterm labor and delivery. And it also inhibits endothelial damage, thereby benefiting in cases of preeclampsia. So we have done a study funded by UGC for calcium supplementation, a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled study, and where we have given 2 grams of calcium per day to a lady in pregnancy from second trimester onward till delivery. And we found that by giving calcium supplementation, the occurrence of preeclampsia and preterm delivery decreases. If we have seen, obviously, when we have seen the dietary data of these women, again, they were taking low calcium, and when we further divided this group on the basis of their dietary calcium into low or high calcium group, we could not find any difference in the occurrence. In both the groups, the occurrence of preeclampsia was statistically significant. So we concluded that there is 66% risk of reduction in the risk of preeclampsia and 44% in the risk of preterm delivery by giving calcium supplementation in the dose of 2 grams per day. There are so many recent trials which have reported that greatest reduction in risk of preeclampsia after calcium supplementation was for the women at high risk and those with low baseline dietary calcium intake. And one of the trial was from the WHO, and they have concluded that in communities with low dietary calcium intake, supplementation with 1.5 gram of calcium per day did not prevent preeclampsia but did reduce its severity, morbidity and neonatal mortality. Then there is a, what we have concluded from this study, that calcium supplementation reduced the occurrence of preeclampsia irrespective of the baseline dietary calcium intake and urinary calcium excretion. But our population itself was having low calcium intake below 1000 milligram per day compared with the recommended dietary allowances. So we inferred that since our population is already low calcium intake, so by supplementing calcium, probably we will have greatest benefit in reducing the risk of preeclampsia and preterm delivery. The recent Cochrane review of 2011 on calcium supplementation during pregnancy have 13 trials, and they have around more than 15,000 women, and our study was one of these trials. And they found that calcium supplementation during pregnancy is a safe and relatively inexpensive and cost-effective means of reducing the risk of preeclampsia in women at increased risk and also in women from communities with low dietary calcium. And calcium supplementation appears to approximately halve the risk of preeclampsia, to reduce the risk of preterm birth, and to reduce the occurrence of composite outcome, death or serious morbidity. Then there are other conditions where calcium has been found to be useful. In this study, atonic PPH has found to be responding to the intravenous administration of calcium. So it may be useful for PPH also. Then calcium and vitamin, mainly the vitamin D, there are studies about the vitamin D deficiency in pregnancy associated with occurrence of high risk of gestational diabetes or preeclampsia or adverse outcome in pregnancy also. And then serum calcium probably or vitamin D deficiency again has been associated with the high incidence of cesarean delivery because again of the low serum calcium levels leading to poor uterine contraction in labor. So probably again there are however more studies are required on that aspect. In the end only I can conclude that vitamin D deficiency is, from the recent literature it has been observed that it is very epidemic in India despite of plenty of sunshine and low dietary calcium intake compared to recommended dietary allowances is there in our population, and there is a need to improve the dietary habits, and calcium and vitamin D supplementation may be effective, safe and cheap methods to improve this. I am emphasizing as madam has in the initial remark she has commented about the dose or vitamin D. Vitamin D will work only if the calcium is there. So we should emphasize, I think, on both calcium and vitamin D. We should improve the calcium in diet, which is a very simple method, and if needed, vitamin D can be supplemented during pregnancy or in the whole life of the woman, because we have seen that if these two parameters are low, there is a risk of weakness in the bone and osteopenia and osteoporosis. Thank you, madam.